You're listening to Paranormal Optimist. My name is Stephanie, and in this podcast, we dissect paranormal topics from the perspective of skeptics, believers, and everyone in between. At the end, it's up to you to decide. Are you a paranormal optimist? Welcome back to another episode of Paranormal Optimist. Just a reminder that you can still find where to follow the show by clicking on the link in the episode description. And to everyone who has followed me already in various places, I see you and I appreciate you. The launch of this show has been a lot of fun so far, even though I am not super great at the social media part. Maybe that's obvious. But to everyone who has listened, suggested the show to someone, or shared the show online, you're amazing. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you. If you'd like to share your story for the podcast, be a guest on the show, or suggest an episode, please send an email to paranormaloptimist@gmail.com. I am trying something a bit different for today's episode. Recently, I visited Chicago and had the opportunity to learn some of the haunted history of the Lincoln Park area. I participated in a walking ghost tour and was even able to rent and use a real EMF detector to do some micro investigation into some spooky locations. It was a lot of fun, and the history, urban legends, and ghost stories surrounding this area are truly fascinating. As an offshoot of this, next week's episode is going to feature some personal stories shared with me that I was able to record while in Chicago. This is exactly the type of thing I'm asking for when I ask you guys to send me an email, so hopefully you'll hear that episode, see what it's like, and then you'll be inspired to send in your own stories. I think you're really going to like it. Most importantly, that means we are finally breaking into the world of ghosts. So let's get started. For this episode, the format will be a bit different. Since this is largely based on information I learned from a walking ghost tour, I'm not going to spend as much time focusing on my normal points of view, like why people do believe or don't believe. Today's episode is mostly going to focus on the history of different locations and the spooky stories surrounding them. We're not here today to prove or disprove anything. We'll start by discussing the roots of Lincoln Park as a functioning cemetery, before moving on to discussing some specific graves from the area. After discussing cemeteries, we will take a look at some notable bars and pubs in the area with ties to prohibition and possibly even satanic rituals. We'll then end the storytelling today with a look at some criminal history and how it shaped urban legends in the Lincoln Park area. Lincoln Park area cemeteries. We think of cemeteries as the final resting place for loved ones lost. A place of remembrance that will stand the test of time for future generations. Well, one horrifying detail I learned through my research into the spooky history of the Lincoln Park area is how wrong that assumption is when you take a look at the history of cemeteries and grave relocations. Until the late 1860s, the area that is now known as Lincoln Park was an overcrowded cemetery called Chicago City Cemetery. With the trauma of the cholera outbreak still ongoing and fresh in everyone's minds, doctors in Chicago argued that it was problematic to bury human remains, many of which died of contagious disease, so close to Lake Michigan. The lake was, and still is, the primary source of drinking water for Chicago and the surrounding area. This idea was punctuated by the incredibly dramatic fact that the cemetery was so overfilled and undermaintained that there were actually newspaper reports from the 1850s that spoke of caskets bursting from the ground and causing the entire area to reek of decay. In 1864, the city council moved to order the removal of all bodies in city cemetery. The plan was to relocate these graves to cemeteries which all sat outside of city limits, such as Rose Hill Cemetery and Graceland Cemetery. Although relocation efforts were ongoing for more than 2 decades, the job was never fully completed. There are no longer rows and rows of grave markers in what is now Lincoln Park, but there are still thousands of bodies buried where Chicago City Cemetery used to stand. Many bodies and markers were moved during the relocation attempts, of course. However, it was apparently not possible to account for every grave that needed relocation due to a combination of poor record keeping and a general loss of records and monuments due to the Great Chicago Fire. There were also sections of the Chicago City Cemetery that were reserved for the unidentified and the unknown, many of whom were victims of either cholera or the Great Fire itself. Now, whenever construction or renovations are done in Lincoln Park, there's a very real chance that workers will accidentally disturb the dead. One example of this I found in a newspaper from January 1903. It talks about how the locations of several previously unknown graves were found recorded in some long-lost records. Since nobody knew of the existence of these unmarked graves, they have now been built over and utilized for other city purposes. So I just want to read a section of this newspaper clipping now. Like I said, this was published in 1903. Bodies of more than 150 persons lie buried, like a tombless city of the dead, under a part of Lincoln Park. Discovery of this fact, hitherto a subject largely of speculation, was made today when an old chart was found in the workshop of a park engineer. The bodies have never been removed since the time the site between Wisconsin Street and North Avenue, east of North Clark Street, was used as a city cemetery. Unmarked by a headstone, not mentioned in the official records, and unknown to thousands of persons who frequent the spot, 145 of the bodies lay clustered together at the north end of the baseball field, 130 by 200 feet in dimensions. Scattered throughout the southern part of the park, 6 other bodies, perhaps many more, lie beneath the lawns and tennis courts. I also found a more recent story of discovering additional unmoved graves from 1998. In 1998, the Chicago Historical Society was having a new parking facility constructed for the museum. 81 partial skeletons were found when they broke ground, and their bones appeared to be more than 100 years old. Aside from the probably 10 to 12,000 unmarked and unaccounted for graves that remain in Lincoln Park, there is also a famous tomb that they never even attempted to relocate. Couch's tomb. Ira Couch was only one of many public figures discussed on a walking ghost tour I took when visiting Chicago. This man was a businessman, known for running the Tremont House Hotel, as well as just being generally one of the wealthiest men in Chicago at the time. After his sudden death at age 50 in 1853, Couch's family had a mausoleum built in what was then the Chicago City Cemetery. The tomb is massive and ornate, surrounded by an iron fence. It is generally believed that the tomb was so large and heavy that it would have been too difficult and too expensive to move, which is why it remains in Lincoln Park to this day. Our tour guide also hinted at some possible political reasons as to why the tomb may remain. But politics are definitely not my specialty. It's a really interesting story to follow down the rabbit hole, though, if you're interested. Beyond not knowing why exactly this Couch tomb is the only tomb which was not moved, because there actually were other tombs that were moved from the Chicago City Cemetery to places like Rose Hill Cemetery and Graceland Cemetery, we are also not sure exactly what remains inside the structure. According to a CBS News article I found, the tomb had not been opened since the early 1900s. Newspaper articles from this time reported that a maintenance worker went inside once and found nothing. No human remains or anything else inside. In response to these claims, members of the Couch family argued that it was impossible that the tomb was empty because there should be the remains of at least 7 people stored inside. Ghost stories about the tomb date as far back as the early 1880s. The story I found online, which was also corroborated by our tour guide, was that if you go out to the tomb at midnight and chant the phrase, "The graves belong to the dead, not the living," 3 times, the door would open and you would be visited by a giant white ghost of Couch himself. The tour guide wanted to emphasize, though, that the parks close at 11, so you should not be there at 12 to try this. Francis Pierce Tomb. Speaking of tombs moved from the Chicago City Cemetery, there are also ghost stories associated with the ones which no longer remain in Lincoln Park. A particularly beautiful tomb, constructed for a young mother and her 10-month-old baby, was relocated to Rose Hill Cemetery. The tomb was constructed in honor of Frances M. Pierce, an 18-year-old mother who died of an unknown ailment and was unfortunately followed in death 2 months later by her child. I say unknown here because it seems that the official story was that she died of some, quote, postpartum or childbirth illness that also claimed her child. I'm not sure what that illness could have been, but it does seem that more recent historians believe that she likely contracted cholera or tuberculosis. As her child was 10 months old when she died, it doesn't seem logical to blame childbirth or even a postpartum illness, but what do I know? I am not a doctor. Her tomb, though, is absolutely gorgeous. I will be posting photos on social media, so I really hope you will take a second to look at them. I will also post links to some articles online which discuss the tomb and also have photos of it. One amazing source that I have used already in this episode, and I will continue to use throughout the rest of the episode, is a website called Hidden Truths, which appears to be maintained by a historian named Pamela Bonos. What you see when you look at the monument built for Frances M. Pierce is an incredibly beautiful and lifelike marble statue of a woman who appears to be asleep, snuggling her infant child. The entire monument is encased in glass to protect it from the elements. The spooky legend associated with this monument is that every year on the 12th of March, the anniversary of her death, the glass surrounding the monument fogs up, obscuring the statue inside from view. With these spooky stories and romantically dreadful imagery in mind, we decided to try to learn how to use our EMF detectors. Here's some audio that proves I am not a professional paranormal investigator.
So, is that working?
Mm-hmm. If it's green, it just means they're not picking up anything, I think, right? Isn't that what it means?
I don't know. Can I look at it?
Yeah.
Do you push it?
Yeah, to turn it on. Oh, it smells so good.
Ooh, got real strong.
It's paranormal how good this restaurant smells.
So what's that do?
Well, we should probably double check with her if it's green or if it's red.
I'm assuming that means low frequency stuff.
Yeah.
Milligus. Is that what it is?
What?
Milligus?
Oh, I don't know.
So what does it mean if it's yellow?
Well,
what does it mean if it's yellow?
It's picking up electromagnetic. So
is it if it's red, you think that it's picking up something, or if it's
red is definitely yes.
Okay.
Yellow is like maybe.
Just the building, basically.
Could be.
We need one of these in the hotel.
No.
I asked you if I've used it in my house, and I said no.
Yeah.
I think it's like
bliss on that one.
The only place we don't do anything like that is at our house. Because our house is 150 years old.
yeah.
Yep.
I mean, bad wiring will set it off too, though.
Yeah.
Even if there's like electrical right outside the walls right here, they'll pick it up.
So if it looks like your fridge is haunted, it probably isn't.
But if we're in a cemetery,
yeah,
then it starts going off.
Did you hear those cicadas? The chittering was a constant soundtrack for our ghost tour. It was kind of creepy, but also strangely beautiful. John Barleycorns. Our next topic of discussion for the haunted history surrounding the Lincoln Park area is the building that used to be called John Barleycorns, now running under the name The Bad Apple. This was a Chicago bar with a rich history, known for its origins as a speakeasy during Prohibition. During this time, after existing as a functioning saloon, the front of the business was boarded up, giving the illusion that the bar had closed due to Prohibition. What was actually happening, however, is that the alcohol was being smuggled in through the adjacent laundry behind the business, and customers utilized a secret elevator so that they could be served in the building's basement. John Barleycorns does not appear to be what the saloon and speakeasy were called historically, but rather was the name of the longest standing business in the building. The name, however, certainly is a throwback to the building's history, as John Barleycorn itself is a personification of alcohol, with roots in folklore and song dating as far back as the 14th and 15th centuries. There are a number of ghost stories associated with this building, many of which are from when it operated as John Barleycorns. After the bar opened, some odd things started to happen. Shot glasses would fall over, employees would hear creaking from the then unused dumbwaiter. A taxidermy moose head flew off the wall. All of these things are blamed on a ghost named the Bearded Bootlegger. This ghost is described as a bearded man wearing a pinstripe suit. He likes to show up in the women's bathroom, which is a very weird, creepy, and unfortunately common trope in Chicago ghost stories. His face will show up in the mirror with his finger held to his lips, as if he's telling you to be quiet or to keep him a secret. John Barleycorn's closed in 2014 and sat vacant for 10 years. During this vacancy, people reported seeing a man in a suit standing at the front door. His figure was reported to be standing in the doorway, looking up until he slowly faded away into nothing. There was also a story about a woman who wanted to buy the location to repurpose it as something other than a bar. When she came to visit with her real estate agent, she ended up running out screaming, saying that she would never return. She also refused to say what she saw. Was she shushed by the Bearded Bootlegger? The quaint assumption overall is that the Bearded Bootlegger didn't want someone buying the place unless they planned to keep it as a bar. Just as is the case for any good ghost story, there's very little we can do to determine how true any of it is. That being said, though, this was the first time on our tour that we tried out the EMF detectors. Listen here for what we experienced.
Oh, I don't like it.
Oh yeah, look at this.
Bring that up there, April, real fast for me.
Yeah, take a picture of April. Oh, that's really cool. You got a picture of it?
Got a video of it for you.
So when we brought the EMF detector up to the front door, it immediately went to the red.
We hated it.
I loved it.
Spooky AF. Almost got hit by a car directly after.
We also almost got hit by a car because we're dumb tourists.
Why is it doing that? April's haunted.
Yeah, I was afraid of doing this, but I recorded it off.
Haunted bars, haunted coffee shops, and cults. The next stop on our tour was a sports bar that had a long and complicated history of spookiness. To truly understand the history of this location, which is now operating under the name Hunters on Halstead, you have to research multiple previous businesses first, such as the Tonic Room and the Golden Dagger. But no matter which business you investigate, most sources seem to list this address as one of the most haunted places in Chicago. When people write about the history of this location, they always seem to start by pointing out that the first business that operated here was a brothel that opened in 1894. While not particularly relevant to the rest of the history, in my opinion, it does set the stage for some of the reported sightings and lore associated with the location. Some bloggers and local historians claim that having a brothel in this part of town, something that really wasn't that uncommon in big cities at the time, invited in an unruly and criminal element to the area. It seems to be the basis for the building's future associations with gang activity and cult activity in the first half of the 20th century. Our tour guide mentioned during her presentation that this was believed to have served as a temporary meeting place for the Order of the Golden Dawn, which was a cult that had some alleged ties with Aleister Crowley. This association feeds into the urban legend that there was also a woman sacrificed here during some cult ritual in the 1930s, but nobody seems to know who this woman was or even if she ever existed. In the 1960s and 70s, the location became a store that sold things like voodoo dolls, incense, charms, and spell beads. After The Exorcist came out in 1973, people didn't like having this sort of store in their neighborhood. Part of this sentiment was presumably due to the Satanic Panic, which was starting to pick up steam during this time. It's also possible, however, that having this type of business operating at this location also added to the general spooky vibe of future urban legends about the location. In later years, the location was repurposed into many different businesses, such as a music room called the Jub Jub Club, a bar called the Tonic Room, and a coffee shop called the Golden Dagger. To understand why a coffee shop would be called the Golden Dagger, we have to start looking at the ghost stories and rumors of general weirdness associated with this location. During renovations, during the building's time as the Tonic Room and the Golden Dagger, several strange things were said to have been found in the basement of the building. Painted on the floor was a red pentagram. The walls and ceiling were completely covered with Egyptian hieroglyphics. And stuck directly in the wall was a rusty dagger with a skull decorated handle. The story goes that after these creepy discoveries, people mostly just moved on with their activities and continued renovations. The walls were presumably repainted and the dagger was removed. A few days later, though, an employee was found unresponsive after going down to the basement to retrieve something. When he came to, he had no memory of what happened to him or why he was incapacitated. The next story is about a customer. He was looking for the bathroom and ended up in the basement. He claims that when he was down there, all the lights went out. A red pentagram lit up on the floor, and he saw a woman all in white walking towards him with a gaping red wound in her chest. As far as the dagger is concerned, there are many rumors about what happened to it. It may have been put inside the wall, or it may be in a safety deposit box somewhere, and that's just assuming that it actually exists at all. But talking about that sighting of the woman in white in the basement, I just wanted to include some audio here of our discussions about this during the tour.
There's always a woman in white.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. It was the
So,
white lady.
I wonder if we've heard a story from that before.
This one sounded like it was supposed to be a representation of the human sacrifice.
Ooh.
Yeah, that was what I was getting from it.
Now I get that, yeah. So it seems like that woman in white was a human sacrifice with the woman in white, feels like.
Yeah, that was my impression.
I hate it.
Yeah, that connection with the movie The Exorcist, there was a lot of things like that around that time because people could not handle that movie.
I can't handle that movie.
Yeah. I mean, by today's standards, it's pretty tame. But back then, it was very different. The Biograph Theater. Our next haunted location we visited while walking around the Lincoln Park area of Chicago was the Biograph Theater. Now closed, this venue originally showed films, but also hosted live performances in its later years. It is one of the many haunted locations in Chicago, which boasts ties with John Dillinger. Although I will say, few other locations can claim stronger association with the man than that of the Biograph. It was in a nearby alley that the famous bank robber was fatally shot by the FBI after viewing a film titled Manhattan Melodrama at this theater. But before we get into that dramatic story, let's look at the general history of the Biograph Theater. Opening in 1914, the Biograph Theater was a cinema servicing the Lincoln Park neighborhood of Chicago. It was an iconic example of grand movie theaters of its time. The interior was ornate, with the viewing area containing a large stage and even a balcony for viewing films. In the 1970s, the cinema was renovated to a more modern style, becoming a 4-screen multiplex. One thing noted by multiple historians is that while the interior of this building has been completely gutted more than once, the exterior of the building remains largely unchanged. After operating for 90 years as a movie theater, the venue was purchased in 2004 and repurposed as a live venue and renamed Victory Gardens at the Biograph. Before I dive into the John Dillinger-related ghost stories, there are a number of quaint little stories associated with the building from its time as a cinema as well as a live venue. As our tour guide explained, theaters will often leave a seat or maybe 2 seats open for the resident ghost. One common urban legend from the time when the Biograph was a cinema was that 2 children were spotted sitting in front row seats, just quietly enjoying the film. When the lights turned on and the movie was over, they disappeared. A truly solid and unverifiable ghost story, the best kind. When the theater was converted to accommodate plays instead of films, there were stories of cast members, employees, and guests being followed by invisible entities. The theater is closed now, but people used to report seeing lights going on and off, both inside and outside the venue. I can say that standing out there on the sidewalk right outside the theater, I did see a light bulb go off inside the theater. However, had the tour guide not mentioned the story of the lights to me, I would not have thought it was unusual at all. I mean, the building is now closed, so I'm not sure why the lights were on to begin with, but I really wouldn't have thought it was weird unless she said that. After leaving the Biograph Theater, though, we had some discussions about how going to these different locations made us feel. I want to say anything about it at that place and the Satanist place right before. You know, I didn't know the story of any of those places, but for a split second at each one of those places, I felt my heart skip a beat. Isn't that weird?
Yeah.
John Dillinger. By far the most famous ghost stories associated with many different locations in Chicago are those that have connections with John Dillinger. So who is he? John Dillinger is a name well known in American criminal history. He was the first person to be labeled by the FBI as public enemy number 1 after a string of crimes that dominated newspaper headlines from 1933 to 1934. His crimes included gang activities, killing at least 10 men, robbing banks, raiding police arsenals, killing a sheriff, and escaping jail on multiple occasions. Born in 1903 outside Indianapolis, Dillinger appears to have had a problematic childhood, flavored by the early death of his mother and the unpredictable disciplinary moods of his father. He claims that his life of crime began during childhood, and it was in a half-hearted attempt to escape punishment that Dillinger enlisted in the Navy in the early 1920s. The station, however, was short-lived, as Dillinger quickly abandoned his post and fled back to Indianapolis. After a failed attempt at armed robbery, Dillinger was sentenced to several years in prison in 1924. He received a joint sentence. One was for assault and battery with intent to rob, which earned him 2 to 10 years in prison. The other was for conspiracy to commit a felony, and that earned him an additional 10 to 20-year sentence. After serving 8 years in prison, Dillinger was paroled and immediately returned to a life of crime. Almost immediately upon his release, he robbed a bank in Ohio and was arrested and jailed again. Dillinger escaped with the help of some of his friends who had escaped from the Indiana prison, where they originally met. Before being captured by the authorities again, Dillinger and his gang robbed several banks and committed a string of other crimes, which resulted in a number of deaths. After being captured again, Dillinger was brought to the county jail in Crown Point, Indiana, before escaping again. After several more months of breaking laws, evading arrest, and even undergoing plastic surgery to hide his identity, the FBI was finally able to locate and gun down Dillinger in the alley outside of the Biograph Theater. It is documented that they were only able to accomplish this with the help of Dillinger's mistress, Anna Sage. Sage was a Romanian immigrant working as a brothel madame in Gary, Indiana. She contacted the FBI and offered to give them information about Dillinger if they agreed to give her a cash reward and help prevent her deportation. In the end, Dillinger was shot 3 times by the agents and died on the scene. Sage was deported back to Romania after the FBI failed to uphold their agreement. Obviously, a story like this lends itself easily to the intense emotional energy that most people associate with ghosts and ghostly activity. There are stories of people seeing a shadowy figure of a man running on the sidewalk or heading for the alley. He runs, then staggers, then falls and disappears, almost as if it's John Dillinger reenacting getting shot by the FBI agents over and over again. There are others who say that they see the figure of Anna in the alleyway, the woman who betrayed Dillinger and was then betrayed by the FBI. Overall, though, maybe a good way to end this story and to maybe back up the spooky vibes that we've been talking about would be to just listen to some things that we recorded at the scene.
Like legitimate, like I had like a knot in my stomach, like anxious all of a sudden. I still have it now, but I don't know if it's just because I am that kind of person sometimes but it wasn't there before. I'm just going to say that.
It's good anecdotal.
Yeah, because it wasn't there until I went in there.
Yeah.
In today's episode, we did a montage of micro-histories regarding famous places in the Lincoln Park area of Chicago. We first discussed the dark history of Lincoln Park itself and its thousands of unmarked graves. We then looked into the history of some notable bars and pubs and discussed their ghostly activities. We ended the ghost talk with a discussion of the history of the Biograph Theater and its connections with the notorious criminal John Dillinger. Throughout, we also heard snippets from our own live reactions and feelings when visiting these places. Overall, when it comes to proving or disproving a ghost story, it's probably not something a podcast is going to be able to accomplish. Did I see any ghosts at any of these locations? No, I didn't. Did I feel weird at any point in the tour? Yes, I did. Is any of that scientific or proof of anything? No, it's not. Was it still a worthwhile experience? Absolutely. I'd love to do more stories like this for other areas. Send me your suggestions. pedestrians. If you'd like to share your story for the podcast, be a guest on the show, or suggest an episode, send me an email at paranormaloptimist@gmail.com. Go to the episode description to see where you can follow the show and check out all the sources I cited in today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Paranormal Optimist. This show was written, produced, and presented by me, and my name is Stephanie. The music in today's episode was obtained royalty-free from Purple Planet Music. See you next time!